I almost didn't notice. That's the part that still keeps me up at night. Not what he did, but how long I almost let it slide. It was a Tuesday in late February, one of those grey Ottawa mornings where the cold gets into your coat no matter how well you button it up. My husband had left for work earlier than usual, and I was standing at the kitchen counter with my coffee going cold, staring at the frost on the back window, thinking about nothing in particular. Just that quiet, low-grade feeling that something was off. The kind of feeling you talk yourself out of 100 times before you finally stop. We had been married for 6 years. I was 31, he was 35. We had a semi-detached Incarnata, a dog named Scout, and a joint savings account I had been contributing to faithfully since the year we got engaged. He worked in project management for a federal contractor downtown. I was a dental hygienist at a clinic in Naparon. Ordinary life. Good life, I thought. I should have paid more attention to when I stopped thinking it was a great life and started just calling it good. The first sign I told myself wasn't a sign he started going to the gym after work instead of before. Not a big deal. People change routines. The second sign I rationalized just as easily. He got a new cologne. Something expensive, heavier than what he used to wear. He said a co-worker recommended it. I thought it was a little unlike him, but I told myself it was nice that he was putting in effort. The third sign I almost didn't register at all. He started keeping his phone face down on the counter. Always face down. Every single time. I am a person who believes in giving people the benefit of the doubt. I was raised that way. My mother always said, "You don't go looking for trouble." So I didn't look. For months, I didn't look. What changed things wasn't anything dramatic. There was no lipstick on a collar, no mysterious number on a receipt. It was a Saturday afternoon in March and I was doing laundry. I picked up his gym bag to check if there was anything in it before I put it by the door, and a receipt fell out. From a restaurant on Elgin Street, dinner for two, $147, on a Wednesday night when he had texted me that he was eating at his desk and would be home late. I stood in the hallway for a long time holding that receipt. I didn't cry right away. I didn't even confront him. I just folded it very carefully and put it in the inside pocket of my winter coat, and I went back to doing the laundry. I think part of me already knew, and the rest of me needed a little more time to accept it. Over the next 3 weeks, I started paying attention. Not obsessively. I wasn't going through his phone or following him. I just stopped looking away. And when I stopped looking away, I saw everything. He was picking up dry cleaning on streets that went between his office and our house. He was buying coffee at a second cup in the Gleep on mornings when he told me he had early meetings in Gatineau. He started being more affectionate with me at home in this way that felt performative, almost guilty, like he was compensating for something I wasn't supposed to know about. In April, I found out who she was. It happened by accident. I was at the Rado Center picking up a birthday gift for my sister-in-law, and I saw him. He was near the entrance to the bay, and he was with a woman. They weren't touching. They were just walking close together, talking, and he was smiling at her in a way that I recognized. It was the same smile from our first year together, easy and unguarded, the smile that used to make me feel like I was the only person in the room. She was maybe 30, well-dressed, confident in how she moved. I stepped behind a display and watched them for 30 seconds. Then I left. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes before I could drive. That night he came home and asked how my day was, and I said, "Fine. I made pasta." We watched television. I did not say a single word about what I had seen. Because I had decided, sitting alone in that parking garage, that I was not going to react. I was going to be careful. I had watched enough people blow up their own lives by confronting a situation before they had any real ground to stand on, and I was not going to do that. What I needed first was information. I want to be honest here about what that period was like, because I think people imagine that when you find out your spouse is cheating, you go into some kind of cold, competent revenge mode. You don't. I was devastated. I cried in the shower. I sat in my car outside my clinic between patients and just stared at the steering wheel. I called my oldest sister one evening and didn't even tell her why I was crying, just let her talk to me about nothing for an hour. I was not a woman with a plan. I was a woman who was falling apart very quietly and trying not to let anyone see it. But grief and practicality can exist at the same time. I had been contributing to that joint savings account for 6 years. We had $68,000 in it. We had the house, which we had bought together, and which had gone up significantly in value since 2019. I had put $40,000 of my own savings into the down payment. In Ontario, the rules around matrimonial property are clear and also complicated. And I knew enough to know I needed someone who understood them better than I did. I booked an appointment with a family lawyer in late April. I told her everything. She was calm and direct, and she made me feel like I was not crazy for wanting to protect myself before doing anything visible. She walked me through what equalization of net family property looks like in Ontario, what I was entitled to, and what I needed to document. She told me to stop contributing to the joint account immediately, open a personal account at a different bank, and start keeping records. I did all of that within the week. I also, in a moment of practicality I am still a little proud of, quietly made photocopies of our mortgage documents, our investment account statements, our tax returns for the past 3 years, and the deed to the house. I put them in a folder at my sister's place, just in case. May came. The situation at home continued as if nothing was wrong. He was home for dinners more often, which I found bitterly funny. He started suggesting we go on a trip in the fall, maybe the East Coast, Nova Scotia maybe, somewhere we had always talked about going. I said that sounded nice. I said it so easily, it scared me a little. The thing about living in the same house as someone you have decided to leave is that it teaches you things about yourself you didn't know. I learned that I am capable of a stillness I didn't think I had. Not coldness. I still felt everything all the time, but I could contain it. I could sit across from him at dinner and talk about whether we should repaint the back deck and feel absolutely nothing on the outside. I told my sister in mid-May, not all of it, just enough. She wanted to call him immediately. I made her promise not to. She was angry at me for being so calm about it. I told her I wasn't calm, I was just not done yet. What I hadn't expected was the phone call I got on a Wednesday evening in the last week of May. I was at the clinic, finishing up some charting after my last patient, and my cell rang from a number I didn't recognize. A local number, Ottawa area code. I almost didn't answer. I picked up on the last ring. Is this Claire? A man's voice. Careful, measured. I said yes. My name is Thomas, he said. I think our spouses know each other. I sat very still. He told me his wife's name. It was the woman I had seen at the Rideau Center. He said he had been suspicious for about 2 months. He said he had done some digging. He didn't go into specifics, and he had found my husband's name. He said he had tracked down my contact information through a mutual connection he didn't want to name yet. He said he was sorry for calling out of nowhere, and he would completely understand if I hung up. I didn't hang up. We talked for almost 2 hours that night, sitting in my car in the clinic parking lot while the light changed from late afternoon to dark. He was an engineer, originally from Kingston, now working for a firm in Orleans. He was 38. They had a 4-year-old daughter. He was quiet and precise in how he spoke. Not emotional, but clearly not okay. He said he had been going back and forth about what to do for weeks and had almost talked himself out of calling me twice. I asked him what he wanted. He said he wanted to not be blindsided. He wanted to know what was actually happening before any legal proceedings started, so he could make decisions with clear information rather than assumptions. He said he suspected his wife was planning to initiate a separation, and he wanted to be in a position where he wasn't reacting. He said, I think we could help each other. I asked him what that meant. He explained carefully. His wife had significant assets, inheritance from her family, a TFSA and RRSP she had built over 10 years, and he believed she was planning to restructure some of those holdings before filing. He had no proof yet. He wanted to document what he could. In exchange, he was willing to share anything he had already found about the timeline of the affair, which would be directly relevant to my situation as well. I told him I needed to think about it. I went home. My husband was on the couch watching the Senators game. I made tea and sat in the kitchen and thought for a long time. I called my lawyer the next morning. She said that collaborating with the spouse of the other party wasn't inherently problematic as long as everything we shared was factual and legally obtainable. She said to be careful, to document every communication with Thomas, and to run anything significant by her before acting on it. She also said, and I appreciated her bluntness, that if Thomas's account was accurate and my husband had any awareness of his affair partner restructuring assets, there could be implications for my own settlement depending on how things unfolded. I called Thomas back that afternoon. Over the next 6 weeks, we built something that I can only describe as a very careful, very strange alliance. We met twice in person. Once at a Tim Hortons in Barhaven, once at a coffee shop near Carlingwood, and we exchanged information the way two people diffusing a situation would, methodically, without drama. He showed me text message screenshots he had retrieved from a backup on a shared family tablet. My husband's name was there. Dates that confirmed the affair had started the previous November. Conversations that were specific enough that any ambiguity I had still been holding on to dissolved entirely. In exchange, I shared what I had about the timeline of behavioral changes I had observed and documented, which helped Thomas establish a pattern for his own records. Thomas told me his wife had already quietly contacted a family law lawyer. He knew because he had found a retainer invoice in a folder she had mislabeled on their shared Google Drive. She had named it Home Renovation Quotes. He said it with such a flat, exhausted kind of irony that I actually laughed and then immediately felt strange about laughing, and then realized that this was probably the first time I had genuinely laughed in 2 months. We were not friends exactly, but there was something between us that I think only exists between people who are going through the same specific kind of loss at the same time, a shorthand, a lack of need to explain certain things. In July, Thomas found what he had been looking for. His wife had transferred $31,000 from a joint investment account into a personal account, registered only in her name. She had done it on a Friday afternoon. Thomas had been named as a joint account holder and had access to the statements. He brought the documentation to his lawyer immediately. He also called me. He said, "I think they're moving faster than we realized. I think you need to talk to your lawyer today." I called my lawyer within the hour. She reviewed what Thomas had shared with her and agreed that the situation had shifted. She recommended we proceed with filing. I won't pretend that filing felt like a victory. I sat in her office on a Tuesday afternoon in late July and signed the documents and then went and sat in my car in a parking garage, a different one this time, on Metcalf, and cried for a while. Not because I wanted to stay. I had stopped wanting to stay a long time ago. But because 6 years is 6 years, and even a marriage that turns out to be built on a lie was still your life, and you grieve the life even when the person inside it is gone. My husband was served on a Thursday. He called me 4 times that afternoon. I let all 4 calls go to voicemail. When I got home that evening, he was there. He had left work early. He looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under him, which I suppose someone had, technically. He said he could explain. I told him he didn't need to. He said it wasn't what it looked like. I have always found that phrase remarkable. The idea that there is a version of receipts and restaurant dinners and 7 months of lying that looks like something else entirely. He said he had made a mistake. I said, that's one word for it. He asked if we could talk about this, really talk, before making any decisions. I told him the decisions had already been made and the paperwork was already filed. He went very quiet. He sat down at the kitchen table, our kitchen table, with the scratch on the corner from when we moved it in 4 years ago, and he put his head in his hands. I let Scout out into the backyard and stood at the kitchen window and watched the dog run through the grass. It was a warm evening. The lilac bush in the corner of the yard was overgrown, and I had been meaning to trim it all summer. I did not feel triumphant. I want to be clear about that. I felt tired and sad, and also, underneath all of that, something that took me a while to name. Solid. Like I had found my footing in something that had been shifting for a long time. The legal process took several months. Ontario's equalization rules meant that the value of all our family property, the house, the savings, the investments, was calculated at the date of separation and divided accordingly. Because of the documentation I had gathered early and the records my lawyer had helped me organize, the process, while not painless, was clear. I was entitled to half the equity in the house, equalization of the net family property, and because I had kept meticulous records of my own contributions since before the marriage, the tracing of my pre-marital assets was relatively straightforward. The house sold in October. Ottawa's market, even softened from the peak years, meant we each walked away with more than I had expected. I was not handed $100 million by a mysterious ally. I want to be honest about that, because real life does not work that way. What I had was fair. What I had was mine, properly and legally, which is more than I might have had if I had reacted in March instead of being careful. Thomas finalized his own separation around the same time. We texted occasionally through the phone. Logistics updates, once just a photo he sent of his daughter at her first skating lesson, which I think he sent because he needed someone who would understand why that felt significant right now. And I did. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in West Portal in November. First floor, bay window, old building with good bones and a radiator that clanks but works. I adopted a second dog, a scruffy little terrier mix from the Ottawa Humane Society that Scout immediately decided was her best friend. I started cooking again properly instead of just making dinner out of habit. I signed up for a pottery class at a studio near my apartment and went twice before realizing I was genuinely bad at it, and went back for a third class anyway. I am not going to tell you that I woke up the morning after he moved out and felt free and healed and ready to build my best life. That is not how it works. I still have bad mornings. I still sometimes reach for my phone to tell him something funny that happened and remember mid-reach that I am not going to do that. Grief is not linear, and anyone who tells you otherwise has either not experienced real loss or is not being honest about it. But here is what I know. I know that the version of me who stood in her hallway in March holding a restaurant receipt and talked herself out of knowing what she already knew, that woman would not recognize the version of me sitting here now, not because I went through something dramatic, but because I decided, at some point in the middle of it all, that I was not going to dismantle my own life in a panic. I was going to be careful and clear-eyed, and I was going to protect what I had built. I know that asking for help, the lawyer, my sister, even the strained and careful partnership with Thomas was not weakness. It was the only reason any of it went as well as it did. I know that the moment I stopped waiting for my husband to be who I needed him to be and started deciding who I was going to be without him, everything shifted. Not immediately. Not cleanly. But it shifted. Scout is asleep under the radiator right now. The terrier is asleep on the couch, which she is not supposed to be on, and I have given up enforcing that. It is February again. A full year since that grey morning with the cold coffee and the frost on the back window. And the city is quiet and cold and entirely ordinary outside my bay window. I am okay, more than okay, most days. That turned out to be enough. I keep coming back to that Tuesday morning in February, the coffee going cold. The frost on the window, the feeling I talked myself out of for the 100th time. What strikes me now isn't what he did. People make choices that hurt other people. That's not new, and it will never stop being true. What stays with me is the gap between knowing and acting. That gap is where everything either falls apart or holds together, and I spent months living inside it. I didn't handle any of this perfectly. I want to be clear about that. There were nights I sat on the bathroom floor and couldn't put a coherent thought together. There were mornings I went into work and cleaned teeth and made small talk and felt like I was performing a version of myself that no longer existed. The stillness I found wasn't some natural gift I was born with. It was something I had to choose over and over on days when choosing it felt completely unreasonable. But here is what I learned about the choices that actually matter. When I found that receipt in March, I had two options. React immediately, which would have felt satisfying for about 4 minutes and left me legally and financially exposed. Or slow down, think clearly, and protect what I had actually built over 6 years of contributing to a life. The second option wasn't dramatic. It didn't feel powerful in the moment. It felt lonely and exhausting, and sometimes deeply unfair. But it was the right thing to do, and not just strategically. There is something about refusing to become the worst version of yourself under pressure that matters beyond the outcome. I didn't want to win by becoming someone I didn't recognize. I wanted to come out of this still being someone I respected. Thomas called me out of nowhere and I almost didn't pick up. I'm glad I did, not just because of what we were able to accomplish together, but because of what that conversation reminded me that clarity is contagious. He was careful and precise and honest about what he knew and what he didn't, and that steadiness helped me find my own. We weren't able to fix what had happened to either of us, but we were able to face it without flinching. And there's a kind of dignity in that which I didn't expect to find in the middle of something so painful. What I know now is that the outcome was shaped by three things I had to keep choosing throughout all of it. The first was integrity. Not doing anything I'd be ashamed of later, even when I had every justification to. The second was thinking carefully instead of reacting, even when every instinct said to burn it all down. The third was just keeping going on the days when I genuinely didn't think I could, which turned out to be most of them. Not lace Hattie, not later, over the phone, where a house sold. The marriage ended. I moved into an apartment with a clanking radiator and the terrier who isn't allowed on the couch but is always on the couch. It is enough. It is more than enough. And I am still unmistakably myself.